Welcome to the Mile High Hoops podcast with me, Jake Shapiro, co-hosted today by my guy, Will Petersen. Will and I have to work our tandem because there's a tandem of issues going on in Nuggets world, Will. Number one, everyone's talking about Michael Porter Jr. trade rumors, but number two, I think it's because do we know if the Nuggets number two is good enough in Jamal Murray? And that's something that I think a lot of people have been asking early on in this season. And the good news for Nuggets fans is over the last couple games, it looks like Jamal Murray has started to turn a corner. And in that game out in Sacramento the other night, he hits a game winner. And that's a real positive sign because we've seen him at times in his career, Will, hit a game winner, and then he gets really hot for like a month.
Yeah, I mean, anytime Jamal Murray can make a big shot like that he did against the Kings, it's huge. I mean, that last 2 minutes, Jake, was just wild. Even really the last minute of that game, the amount of lead changes, the momentum swings. It was a game, yeah, it's December, I get it. But it was a game you just felt like the Nuggets needed to win to sort of prove to themselves, A, they can win that type of game on the road, hostile environment, but B, that Jamal sort of played the role of hero. That two-man game with Jokic, it kind of brought back memories of what we saw 18, 19 months ago when they went on an all-time playoff run. So I was encouraged for sure. The one thing I will say, though, Jake, is Jamal took 26 shots and scored 28 points, all right? Like, I was joking with James Merrillat last night. That was kind of a Carmelo Anthony stat line, if you will. So that's my only thing. I love seeing 28. We hadn't seen 28 from Jamal, and it felt like forever. But I would like to see it be a little more efficient. Beggars can't be choosers. It was still a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, a positive sign that Jamal shot that much, even though it was that inefficient, because I've seen him at times be less aggressive. He seems to almost get down on himself, which he had never done before. Even going back to the Lakers series last year, he was struggling the first three quarters of those games, but kept shooting, and he shot himself into those games in the fourth quarter. So I really liked that from Jamal. And I go back to 2 years ago, about the same time of year, Portland, he hits a game winner. And from that point forward, the Nuggets go on an absolute tear. At that point in the season, the Nuggets were 15-10. The Nuggets are 14-10 right now. Last year, the Nuggets started 15-9. So this is about where the Nuggets have started. And they have the weakest strength of schedule remaining out of Western Conference teams. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone that there are clearly flaws on this team. Clearly. I wrote this yesterday, Will. The difference between the Nuggets, who are last place in three-point shooting in the NBA, and Philadelphia, who's second to last place, is the same difference from Philadelphia to Atlanta, who's at number 14. Wow. That's how few threes the Nuggets have shot this year. So there are some clear holes. But I also think if you look and take a 1,000-foot view at this, maybe they aren't as in bad of shape as has been made out to be, especially if Jamal looks like he may have turned the corner.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, we have to remember, Jake, this team is notoriously slow starting. And then every year we go through this panic. What's wrong with the Nuggets? What's wrong with the Nuggets? You mentioned 2 years ago, well, they win an NBA title. And then last year they were, a 20-point Game 7 lead at home away from being in the Western Conference Finals. So, yeah, it does seem like we have to remind ourselves, like, okay, take yourself back to December of 2023. Take yourself back to December of 2022. It's not hot starts out of the gates for these guys. I think where the worrisome comes in is that it does look like Jamal at times is just falling off a cliff. Like, he's playing like a 37-year-old in a 27-year-old's body. And that's why the Sacramento thing was so encouraging, because I can't remember a pro athlete who's supposed to be in his prime look like he lost it this quickly, like just not the same player. That could be a conditioning thing. That could be a mental thing. Like, I don't think the Monstars from Space Jam just came down and stole Jamal Murray's talent, but he's going to have to find a way to get it back. That's why the other night was encouraging. Still, you got your blue and gold glasses on if you're sitting here saying there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. There's still something wrong with Jamal, but baby steps, we'll take it.
There is so much to believe that there is something wrong, that the front office is still considering a major shakeup. And I say still because it was reported pretty heavily this offseason that they were considering trading Michael Porter Jr. for Paul George. And I think this is getting lost in the Michael Porter Jr. rumors, is that now this has been 2 straight trade cycles where the Nuggets have been linked to other big name players in regard to moving Michael Porter Jr. I just read to you that 3-point statistic, which is devastating. And obviously MPJ is one of their only 3-point shooters. He's shooting 6 threes a game, Will, and grabbing 5.5 defensive rebounds. The Nuggets' defensive rebounding rate is bottom third in the league. It's horrible. They can't rebound. So they can't shoot and they can't rebound. So why trade the best shooter they have and their second best defensive rebounder? And it's because he's the only tradable guy of the four right now. Obviously, you're not trading Jokic. So I look at this Porter stuff and I say, I don't think he's the perfect solution to fixing the Nuggets' problems by shipping him out for somebody else. I'd rather wait. But I look at Porter and I understand why people might want him gone. At the same time, he's bought into being a third or a fourth guy. He's bought into being an all-around player. He's figured out how to be a 3-level scorer. And by the way, the guys who shoot 6 3-pointers a game and grab 5.5 defensive rebounds in the game in the NBA, there's 10 of them. 7 of them are all-stars. One of them is Cade Cunningham, who's going to be an all-star this year. Another's MPJ, and another is Bridges in Carolina, who's a solid player. So I don't really see how the Nuggets can improve by trading Porter for another player. Do you think there's a way the Nuggets can trade Porter and get something back that makes them actually a better team?
Well, I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit on the Zach LaVine stuff because that's sort of the biggest name. All right, so first of all, when's the last time they got the best player off a bad team and it worked? Aaron Gordon. It worked in a big way, right? Everyone said Aaron Gordon's not a winner. He's down in Orlando, whatever. They trade for Aaron Gordon. What does Nikola Jokic instantly do to everyone, Jake? He makes their game 10 times better. That's what Gordon did. He embraced his role. Nuggets win a championship. Zach LaVine's the best Bulls player on a bad team, okay? And he's averaging about a 3 made more per game than Michael Porter Jr. He's shooting from 3 about 4 percentage points better. He's averaging more points per game. Guy's been an all-star before. The only thing Porter's better at than him is rebounding, which I know you're hammering the rebounding, and rightfully so. But I just think if LaVine has already proved he's a pretty good level player on a bad team, an all-star player at times on a bad team, why not roll those dice again if it feels like Porter has hit a ceiling in Denver? All of a sudden, LaVine comes to the Mile High City, and this dude gets the Jokic bump that everyone gets when they play with Nikola Jokic. That move would be tempting to me if I could attach the contract of Zeke Naji to dump that as well. Porter and Naji for Zach LaVine. Jake, I know social media is ablaze about it, and it seems like 90% of Nuggets fans don't want to do it. I might pull the trigger. I'm not going to lie, my friend.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest issues is that it's super duplicative of Jamal Murray. Zach LaVine and Jamal Murray have very similar games. And Zach LaVine does not play a lick of defense. Maybe that would change playing for a better team. Just
Does
trying to
Porter play a lick of defense? Maybe a baby lick?
Yes. He, for his size and the amount of off-ball help he provides, he's not a plus defender, but he's turned into an average defender. Okay. And he's a good help side defender, and he helps clear the glass, which defensive rebounding is part of it. I just think that with Zach LaVine, who, by the way, is the best option of the big names the Nuggets have considered, Brandon Ingram would be an absolute disaster. Like, that is not something Nuggets fans should want. Cam Johnson would be a decent player to add, but I'm not trading a star player for a role player, and MPJ has the ability to be a star at times. Cam Johnson has never been a star at times. So of all the names considered, I like some of the smaller moves. I mean, if you can get Dorian Finney-Smith for Zeke Naji in a first, like, that's something that I'm interested in. My whole point being is I still think the Nuggets starting 5 and their core 4 are good enough to win another championship, and it doesn't need a whole shakeup. But the fact that they're considering a shakeup tells you that the Nuggets internally know that they are not good enough. I still think they need to make a couple more moves around the periphery. The problem is all the moves Calvin Booth have made around the periphery the last couple of years have been an absolute disaster.
Well, he drafted Christian Brown. That one's worked out. But
well, after that offseason, that offseason, great. Since then,
Russell Westbrook's a disaster at this point? I wouldn't call him a disaster. I think he's actually fit in pretty nicely.
Okay, he's been about as good as you could hope for if you were a Nuggets fan. I agree with you. The bigger contract handed out was Dario Saric. That did not work out. They traded a lot of assets to get rid of Reggie Jackson, which seemed like an unforced error. And that's part of the reason why they have such limited options now, is because of the Reggie Jackson contract that he signed and then trying to get off that contract. So that's why I look at it. And I think, Will, for me, what I come back to is I don't want the Nuggets making a major shakeup if Calvin Booth is ultimately not going to be the guy moving forward. And he's in a contract year. And if the Nuggets are making a move, Calvin Booth's making a move to save his job, that's not necessarily long-term vision, but short-sighted, that's where I get scared, Will.
Okay, and that's fair. I get that. Like, no one likes when a manager gets to make decisions and then the manager gets fired. It's like, well, why did the manager get to make those decisions? And that would be the case if Calvin Booth isn't back with the Nuggets next year. But other side of the coin, you said MPJ has shown he can be a superstar. Well, I'll show you where he scored in single digits in 5 of the 7 games against the Timberwolves last year and was the reason the Nuggets didn't go to the Western Conference Finals. I think go to the NBA Finals and potentially go back-to-back. Like, Jake, I think Porter's hit his ceiling in Denver. And I just go back to Jokic makes everyone better around him. If you can use Porter to get an all-star like LaVine and then Jokic can elevate even further, I think you have to consider doing it just because I think MPJ is who he is at this point. And he hadn't been very good in either of the last 2 playoff runs. He was not the reason they won the championship in 2022, or I guess 23. They won it in spite of him.
That's why I had Will Petersen on today, to balance my pro MPJ love. He's the Mizzou guy. I'm not even the Mizzou guy. Look at this.
MPJ played like 2 games at Mizzou, bro. That doesn't give you much of a bonus in my book.
Tiger for life. Will Petersen, Jake Shapiro, Mile High Hoops podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to Denver Sports on YouTube. We've got all sorts of great content, including Will's Mile High Hockey podcast. They've got the latest on the Avalanche over there, so make sure you check it out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next